She announced at my birthday party, "I'm polyamorous now. Accept it or we're done." I smiled. "I support your journey." Then I introduced her to my parents, both divorce attorneys who specialize in infidelity cases. When they handed her papers for the apartment lease violation and unauthorized subletting charge, there's something uniquely humiliating about being blindsided with relationship-altering news at your own birthday party. But there's also something uniquely satisfying about watching someone who thinks they're holding all the cards suddenly realize they've been playing an entirely different game. I'm Alex, 31M, and until 3 months ago, I was in what I thought was a committed relationship with Mia, 29F. We'd been together for just over 2 years, living in the same apartment for the last 6 months. The apartment was in my name only, a detail that will become important later, because I'd signed the lease before we started dating. When Mia moved in, we discussed adding her to the lease, but she was between jobs at the time and didn't want the obligation. We agreed to revisit it once she was more settled in her career. Mia was creative, spontaneous, and passionate, all qualities I loved about her. I'm more analytical and measured, working as a software engineer for a fintech company. We balanced each other well, or so I thought. What I didn't realize was that Mia's spontaneity sometimes crossed into impulsivity, and her passion occasionally manifested as selfishness. The beginning of the end came on my 31st birthday last April. I'd planned a small gathering at our apartment, just close friends, my sister and my parents, who were driving in from the suburbs for the weekend. Nothing fancy, just drinks, food, and good company. Mia had been acting distant for a couple of weeks, constantly on her phone and taking calls in another room. I'd noticed, but chalked it up to stress from her new job at a marketing agency. I should have paid closer attention to the signs. My parents arrived early to help set up. They've always been supportive of my relationships, though they can be a bit intimidating. Both successful divorce attorneys with a small but prestigious firm, they've seen the worst of human behavior and have a finely tuned radar for bullshit. My dad handles the financial aspects of divorces, while my mom specializes in cases involving infidelity. They're a formidable team professionally, but they're also loving, protective parents who generally try not to bring their work into personal matters. The party was going well. Friends had arrived, drinks were flowing, and I was having a good time despite Mia's obvious distraction. She kept checking her phone and glancing at the door. Around 9 p.m. the doorbell rang, and Mia practically sprinted to answer it. She returned with a tall, bearded guy I'd never seen before. "Everyone, this is Julian," she announced, her hand resting on his arm in a way that was unmistakably intimate. The room went quiet. I stood there, birthday drink in hand, completely confused. "Julian's a colleague from work," she continued, either oblivious to or ignoring the tension. "We've been spending a lot of time together recently." My friend Dave, never one for reading a room, awkwardly offered Julian a beer. As the party attempted to resume, Mia pulled me into our bedroom. "We need to talk," she said, her voice firm but excited. "I've been doing a lot of self-discovery lately, and I've realized something important about myself." My stomach dropped. I knew whatever came next wouldn't be good. "I'm polyamorous, Alex. This is who I truly am. I've been fighting it for years, but meeting Julian helped me understand myself. He's polyamorous too, and he's helped me see that I can love multiple people at once." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "So, you brought a guy you're sleeping with to my birthday party to tell me you want an open relationship?" She frowned. "It's not just about sex. It's about emotional connections. And it's not an open relationship, it's polyamory. There's a difference. Julian and I have a connection, but that doesn't diminish what you and I have." Did it not occur to you that maybe this conversation should have happened before you started seeing him? Or at least not at my birthday party with my parents in the next room? She sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. "I knew you'd react this way. That's why I wanted Julian here, to help explain how beautiful polyamory can be when everyone's on board. And honestly, I was nervous to bring it up earlier. I thought having Julian here would make it easier." I took a deep breath. "And if I'm not on board?" She looked me straight in the eye. "Then we're done, Alex. I can't suppress who I am anymore. You need to accept it, or we need to end things." I felt a strange calm wash over me. In an instant, I saw our relationship with perfect clarity, not as I wished it to be, but as it actually was. Mia had never really considered my feelings or boundaries important. This ultimatum wasn't about polyamory, it was about control. "I need some time to think," I said. "Of course," she replied, already reaching for the door. "Take all the time you need. Julian and I will be right outside when you're ready to talk more." I sat on our bed for a few minutes, collecting myself. Then, I rejoined the party, where Mia and Julian were huddled together on our couch, while my friends shot concerned glances my way. My parents, ever perceptive, had clearly sensed something was wrong. When my mom asked if everything was okay, I gave her the short version. Her expression shifted from concern to something harder, and she exchanged a meaningful look with my dad. They'd seen this scenario play out hundreds of times in their professional lives, though usually after marriage, not before. The party wound down quickly after that. As guests left, I pulled Mia aside. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told her, keeping my voice neutral. "If this is really who you are, I don't want to stand in your way." Relief washed over her face. "Thank you for understanding, Alex. This doesn't have to change things between us. It can make us stronger." Julian is actually looking for a place to stay right now. His lease is ending in a few weeks, and he's having trouble finding something affordable. I was thinking he could crash here sometimes while he apartment hunts. The audacity was breathtaking, but instead of arguing, I simply nodded. "We should all sit down and talk about expectations and boundaries. Why don't you both come over for dinner tomorrow night? My parents will still be in town. They can join us." She hesitated. "Your parents?" "I'm not sure that's the best idea for our first polyamory discussion." "They're important to me, Mia. If this is going to work, everyone needs to be comfortable with each other." She couldn't argue with that without revealing her true intentions, so she reluctantly agreed. That night, as Mia slept, or pretended to sleep, beside me, I lay awake planning my next steps. I wasn't interested in polyamory. Not because I think it's wrong, but because it wasn't what I wanted for myself. More importantly, I wasn't interested in being with someone who would ambush me with life-changing decisions and ultimatums. The next morning, while Mia was in the shower, I spoke privately with my parents. "I need your help," I told them. "Not as my parents, but as people who understand relationship dynamics and boundaries." Over coffee, I explained the situation in detail. How Mia had moved in without being added to the lease. How I suspected she'd been bringing Julian to our apartment while I was at work. I'd noticed unfamiliar items appearing and disappearing, and our doorman had casually mentioned Mia's friend had been around several times. How she'd announced her polyamory as a fait accompli, not as the beginning of a discussion. My parents listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Then my father asked the question that mattered most. "What do you want, Alex?" "I want out," I said without hesitation. "But I want to do it right." They nodded in understanding and offered to help. My mom suggested we consult with their colleague Rachel, who specialized in landlord-tenant law, to understand my options regarding the living situation. One quick call later, and Rachel had provided some initial guidance. Since Mia isn't on the lease, but has lived there for 6 months, she's established tenancy rights in most jurisdictions, Rachel explained over the phone. However, if she's violating the terms of your lease by bringing in another occupant or subletting, that gives you grounds to address the situation formally. Armed with this information, my parents and I reviewed my lease agreement together. Sure enough, there were clear provisions about unauthorized occupants and subletting. The dinner that evening was a masterclass in professional civility. My parents welcomed Julian warmly, asking about his work and interests, as if this were a normal meeting of friends. Mia seemed relieved, clearly interpreting their politeness as acceptance. After the meal, as we settled in the living room with drinks, my mom steered the conversation toward practical matters. "So, Julian, Alex tells us you might be staying here sometimes?" Julian nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, my lease is ending soon, and apartment hunting in the city is brutal. Mia suggested I could crash here while I look for a new place." "That's very generous," my dad chimed in, "though it does raise some practical questions. Alex, doesn't your lease have restrictions on guests and occupancy?" I nodded, playing along. Now that you mention it, I think it does. My mom pulled out a folder she'd brought with her. Actually, I asked Alex to show us his lease agreement earlier today, out of professional curiosity. It's quite specific about unauthorized occupants. Section 8.3 prohibits any person not on the lease from residing in or regularly staying at the apartment. Julian looked confused. I'd just be staying occasionally. Define occasionally, my mom pressed gently. Mia jumped in. This feels very legalistic. We're just talking about Julian spending a few nights a week here while he apartment hunts. A few nights a week would constitute regular occupancy according to most lease terms, my mom explained, her tone perfectly professional. And Alex mentioned the doorman has already noted Julian as a frequent visitor. Mia's face paled. The doorman keeps track? It's a security building, I explained. They keep a visitor log, not detailed records, but they do note patterns for security purposes. My dad took over. There's also the matter of the subletting clause. Section 11.2 explicitly prohibits subletting or assigning any portion of the premises without written consent from the landlord. I'm not subletting anything, Mia protested. Actually, you are, my mom countered. Julian, didn't you mention earlier that you've been contributing to household expenses when you stay over? Julian nodded hesitantly. Just a few $100s to help out with utilities and stuff. Mia said it was only fair since I've been staying over regularly for the past few weeks. Mia shot him a look that could have melted steel. That could be construed as payment for accommodation, my dad said, which constitutes unauthorized subletting. My mom slid a document across the coffee table. This is a draft notice outlining potential lease violations. It hasn't been filed with anyone, but it details the issues that could be raised with the landlord if this situation continues. And this, my dad added, producing another document, is a summary of tenancy rights and responsibilities in this state, including the proper procedure for when someone needs to vacate a shared living space. Rachel, our colleague, who specializes in landlord-tenant law, prepared it. The room went silent. Mia stared at the papers, then at me, realization dawning on her face. You planned this, she said quietly. I nodded. Not the part where you cheated on me and tried to disguise it as polyamory, but everything after that? Yes. I never cheated, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Polyamory isn't cheating. Polyamory that's discussed, negotiated, and consensual isn't cheating. I corrected her. What you did, starting a relationship with someone else secretly, then presenting it to me as an ultimatum, that's just cheating with extra steps. Julian looked increasingly uncomfortable. Mia told me you two had already discussed opening up the relationship, and you were cool with it. She said you just needed time to adjust to meeting me. I turned to him. She lied to you too, then. Last night was the first I'd ever heard about any of this. He stood up abruptly. I think I should go. That's probably best, my mom agreed. But before you do, you should know that you've been misled about the living situation here. If you continue to stay overnight regularly without being added to the lease, it could potentially create legal complications. After Julian left, Mia exploded. How dare you ambush me like this? Involving your parents, threatening me with legal action. This is insane. More insane than bringing your lover to my birth party and giving me an ultimatum to accept your polyamory or break up? I asked calmly. I was being honest about who I am. No, you were retroactively justifying your cheating. If you were truly interested in ethical polyamory, you would have discussed it with me before starting something with Julian. My dad cleared his throat. The legal issues remain, regardless of the relationship dynamics. You need to make other living arrangements, Mia. Given the circumstances, it would be best for everyone if you began looking for a new place to live. You can't just kick me out, she retorted. I have rights. I've been living here for 6 months. You do have rights, my mom acknowledged. And we're not suggesting immediate eviction. What we are suggesting is that continuing to live together after this would be untenable for both of you. Alex is willing to provide reasonable time for you to find alternative housing. We were thinking 30 days, which is standard notice. And where am I supposed to go? She demanded. My mom smiled thinly. I believe Julian has a place for another few weeks before his lease ends. Perhaps you could stay with him while you both apartment hunt. After all, you're in a relationship now. Mia looked from my mom to me, finally understanding the position she was in. This isn't about the lease at all, is it? This is revenge. No, I said honestly. It's about consequences. You made choices that violated our relationship. Now you're facing the natural results of those choices. We negotiated the details over the next hour. In the end, we agreed that she would move out within 2 weeks. I would refund her portion of the month's rent, and in exchange, she would leave without pursuing any tenancy claims. My parents recommended putting this agreement in writing, which we did. A simple document that we all signed. She left that night to stay with a friend, taking an overnight bag with her. Over the next 2 weeks, she returned several times with friends to collect her belongings, each visit tense but civil. My parents stayed in town for the weekend as planned, but checked in regularly by phone to make sure things were progressing smoothly. Julian, to his credit, reached out to apologize after speaking further with Mia. She finally admitted she never talked to you about any of this before starting something with me, he wrote. I would never have gotten involved if I'd known. That's not how ethical polyamory works. I appreciated his honesty. He even offered to return the money he'd contributed for staying at the apartment, explaining that Mia had told him I knew about and approved the arrangement. I told him to keep it. He'd been misled just as much as I had. In the 3 months since then, I've had time to reflect on what happened. I don't regret how I handled things. I could have exploded at the party, or engaged in petty revenge tactics, or tried to make the breakup as painful as possible for Mia. Instead, I simply enforced boundaries, both emotional and legal, that she had chosen to ignore. I later learned from mutual friends that Mia and Julian's relationship imploded within weeks. Apparently, he discovered she was also seeing someone else, without informing him. So much for ethical polyamory. My parents, always practical, suggested I find a new apartment when my lease ends next month. Too many memories, my mom said, and you might want a fresh start. They're probably right, as usual. Last week, I received a rambling email from Mia, alternating between apologizing for how things ended and accusing me of manipulating and embarrassing her. She suggested we meet for coffee to clear the air. I haven't responded and don't plan to. Some people have suggested I was too harsh, that I should have just broken up with her without involving my parents or exploring legal options. But I disagree. Mia didn't just suggest polyamory. She forced a unilateral decision on me, violated my trust, and tried to move someone else into my apartment without my informed consent. Then she presented it as an ultimatum. Accept it, or we're done. I simply showed her that ultimatums work both ways. Eat it. Thanks for all the comments and support. To address some common questions. 1. Yes, the lease violation concerns were legitimate. My building has strict rules about occupancy, mainly for insurance and security reasons. While we never actually filed anything with the landlord, the drafted documents outlined real potential violations that could have led to problems for me as the leaseholder. 2. My parents didn't threaten to sue Mia, they simply helped me understand my rights and hers in this situation. The papers were informational documents about potential lease violations and tenancy rights, not legal threats. We resolved everything through a mutual agreement. 3. Julian wasn't a bad guy, he was misled as well. Mia told him I knew about and approved of both their relationship and his staying at our place. When he learned the truth, he apologized and removed himself from the situation. 4. I have nothing against ethical polyamory. What I have a problem with is someone starting another relationship without my knowledge, then retroactively claiming it's polyamory and giving me an ultimatum to accept it. 5. For those asking why I let her move in without adding her to the lease, that was definitely a mistake on my part. We had initially planned to add her after her probation period at her new job, but I didn't follow up when the time came. Lesson learned. 6. Yes, I understand Mia had established certain tenancy rights despite not being on the lease. That's why we negotiated her exit rather than demanding she leave immediately, and why I refunded her portion of the rent for the remainder of the month. Update. 6 months later. Life has settled into a new normal since my last post. I moved into a new apartment in a different neighborhood, Smaller than my old place, but with a great view and no memories of Mia. My parents helped with the move, of course, and my dad insisted on reviewing the new lease agreement, just to be safe. The most unexpected development came about 2 months ago. I was grocery shopping when I literally ran carts with a woman in the produce section. We laughed, apologized simultaneously, and ended up talking as we shopped. Her name is Lauren, she's an architect, and we've been dating casually since then. The best part? She's straightforward and values clear communication. After our 3rd date, she actually said, "I believe in defining relationship boundaries early so there are no surprises later." Music to my ears. I've only heard about Mia through mutual friends. Apparently, she's now claiming to be in a committed, monogamous relationship with someone new. Our friend Dave saw her at a bar last month and reported that she referred to her polyamory phase as a journey of self-discovery that helped her appreciate traditional relationships. Whatever helps her sleep at night, I guess. Julian, surprisingly, reached out via LinkedIn to let me know he'd moved to Portland for a job opportunity. His message was brief but thoughtful. "Hope you're doing well. Thanks for handling everything with class last year. Learned some valuable lessons about communication and trust." As for my parents, they've been sharing my story, with names changed, of course, as a cautionary tale with some of their clients. My mom called recently to say they've seen several cases involving partners suddenly declaring themselves polyamorous after being caught in questionable situations. "You were ahead of the trend," she quipped. "The whole experience taught me more about boundaries than I ever wanted to learn, but I'm grateful for the lesson. I've become more assertive about my needs and expectations in relationships and more attentive to early warning signs of dishonesty." Sometimes I wonder if I could have handled things differently with Mia. Maybe a private conversation instead of the dinner ambush? But then I remember her bringing Julian to my birthday party, giving me an ultimatum, and planning to move him into my apartment without real consent. The symmetry of our ending feels appropriate. For anyone dealing with a similar situation, it's not about the lifestyle choice, it's about respect and honesty. Whether monogamous, polyamorous, or anything else, a relationship without clear communication and consent is just manipulation with extra steps. I still have the birthday gift Mia gave me that night, an expensive watch I've never worn. I considered selling it or giving it away, but instead, it sits in my dresser drawer as a reminder that sometimes the most valuable gifts are the painful lessons that ultimately set you free.